every podcast again. Swear he's trying to sell Liverpool posters.
And cats.
Yeah. I've got a good question on the back of that, Dave. So obviously each project's different that you get from whether it's BT Sport or Liverpool. And I know you mentioned, you try and come up with the concept first and then you try and get the art to match that concept sort of. Do you get the briefs first and then look for people or illustrators or designers to work with on the back of the concepts?
Yeah.
Or do you just go, this is what I know that some people are capable of, I'm just going to let them come up with the concept? What do you look for when you're looking for illustrators to work with?
I think it depends on the project, but stuff like, projects where I'm in charge of finding illustrators to work on stuff and I'm directing them, often I will try and come up with the idea first, or at least a rough concept of, this is the game, this is what we're trying to do, this is a rough outline of the idea, and then find an illustrator that I think works in that style, because there's certain stuff that I know, like Karl does, for example, but there's no point me asking Karl to do some like Monet style piece of historical art when that's just not his style. So it definitely works better, I think, to come up with the idea and then find the artist to fit. But then it's never, or I'd like to think it's never set in stone. Often I'll brief artists with a rough idea and say, maybe give them a few references or a couple of lines of copy.
Yeah.
But sometimes it works really well for artists to come back and say, that's cool, but have you actually thought about doing it like this? Or so it's quite a collaborative thing. But I'd always say most of the time, trying to find the artist to fit the idea is better than picking anyone and then saying like, oh, do you reckon you could do this? And they're like, oh, it's not really my style. Or what about this idea? And that's the great thing for me about commissioning other people, is that I can come up with ideas that I know I could never do. There's like some of the artists I've worked with this last year, well, are unbelievable. And I'm asking them to do certain things thinking, like, I can think of this idea, but there's no way I could execute it like you can. But it gives you much more freedom than to be creative, because there's no barriers. If it's a really complex idea, I just find someone who's incredibly good at complex pieces of art. And so I've definitely found that quite freeing, really, because there was certain times in the past I've worked on client work and I've thought I'd love to do like this, but there's no way I could do it in the time available, or it would take me way too long, or it wouldn't quite be good enough, I think, to justify charging a client for it. So it's nice having the option of literally this worldwide network of illustrators and designers that you can go to and find the right person to fit the job.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I think, don't know, do you have a question then, Yoni?
Yeah, just off the back of that, because I think that the setup that you have specifically with Liverpool is really interesting, and I think feels relatively unusual in the space, because obviously a lot of clubs, I think, just would kind of keep that kind of creative direction, I guess, in-house in some way. But so I would like to just know a little bit about the way that first developed. So like when you first started working with Liverpool on pre-match graphics and that kind of thing, did they approach you with this kind of setup in mind, where they wanted you to lead the creative side of it but not necessarily do all of the work?
It was a bit of both, to be honest. So I think it was probably 3 years ago I first started working on some content with them, and it was all illustrated content. And we came up with this idea between us pretty much to do a regular piece throughout the season. So it wasn't a piece for every single game, but we pick out standout games and create them for certain matches. And basically, it was just too much work for me to do by myself. So I suggested getting a few other people on board. And then, it just evolved into that first season. I think there was 6 of us. So I kind of kept control of the project. So I was the focal point that found the artists and come up with the ideas, brief the artists on what to do, and then they'd feedback to me, and I'd help them through the process of giving them some direction or feedback, whatever. And so in that sense, it made it easier for the club, because they weren't getting bogged down with artists asking them for feedback or asking them questions about technical stuff or specifications, stuff like that. So, but it was never, again, I think like most of the things in my career, it was never like a grand plan. I never went and thought, I'm going to pitch this idea that me and 20 artists from around the world are going to do this massive project between us. But it was very much like, what do you think about this idea? And so, yeah, that's cool. Can you do it? And I'd be like, not by myself. No, it's probably too much. Or actually that first year, was probably the opposite. There was times when I'd say, oh yeah, I'll do it all. And then they'd be like, really though? Honestly, can you do it all? Can you do it all on time and good enough? And I'd be like, well, maybe not. So then it just evolved into me getting some help. And it's grown from there really, yeah. So there's a couple of projects that I'm working on this season. One illustrated based, and then one more kind of graphic design based. And so once, I think it was three years ago, once we did that initial project and people got their heads around how it worked and it went quite well and it did well kind of online. I think it was much easier then to go to them and other clients and say, this is almost like a case study and this is how the project will work. This is what I will do in it. I can find people from anywhere really, because with the internet now, it's quite easy to scout around and find good illustrators and designers and get them involved. And then, and there's loads of perks to it. I think I keep getting messages lately of people saying, I really think it's great what you're doing for the design community and you're so lovely to get everyone involved. And honestly, that's not the reason. It's not like I'm this sainted designer that wants to spread the wealth. Yeah, it's more just, there's loads of perks to these type of projects that I think people maybe don't see from the outside, but getting different people to do stuff every week makes the artwork different every week. And it sounds so simple, but like if I end up doing a project by myself and I was producing 20 pieces across the season, they might all be slightly different, but essentially you'd probably be able to look at it and know that it was mine because there's only so many different styles of illustration I can do. But getting different artists and designers involved, I think just makes it feel really fresh. And so having someone in like my position as that go-to kind of middleman almost helps keep stuff on brand and stuff consistent. And so there is a sense of consistency throughout these projects because I'm managing them all and kind of offering my feedback throughout, but kind of leaning on people's different skills and even just the way people interpret briefs differently is great. I think so. I love it when people send me what they've done and it's like, whoa, that is nothing like I would have thought of, or I would never have thought of doing that. That's such a good way of putting a composition together or combining colors or textures and stuff like that. So again, I think it goes back to that, what I was saying before. It's nice when you're involved in a project, but it's like essentially much better than I would ever do by myself. And so it brings in all these other strands of skills and techniques and working with people from different countries as well. I think it's really interesting because they just have a different approach to design at times, or they come up with different ways of doing things that would never cross my mind, or stuff I've never seen before that is quite cool. So yeah, I've found lately I've really enjoyed those projects almost more than like doing the work myself, because it's a different kind of project and there's different challenges to it, but it feels like the possibilities are endless almost, because you're not constricted by your own skills or your own creativity, and you can kind of share the wealth almost and get other people involved. And yeah, it seems to be going quite well.
Sure.
I
just
wanted to ask a question off sort of the back of that. So if, you know, when you're sort of collaborating with an illustrator and stuff to create these projects, if for some reason like the project can't be done or you can't complete it, do you kind of sort of set yourself a little backup piece just in case you need something to fall back on? Or I mean, I guess generally 99% of the time it's pretty straightforward to complete, but I've just wondered what kind of you would do in a scenario where, you know, obviously there's a deadline and you might kind of struggle to get it sort of completed. Do you sort of just, you know, create a little backup piece yourself, or do you just throw caution to the wind and see how it goes type thing?
No, to be honest, there's never a backup plan because the plan is plan A, and so plan A has just got to get done. And I think that's one of those things that, like this recent project I'm working on now, is commissioning graphic designers to produce like a match day graphic. And there's a whole range of different designers I've worked with, but some of them are quite young, and so you kind of forget what it was like to be a young designer and maybe not realize how important deadlines are, or not realize how important brand guidelines are, or sticking to a brief and stuff like that. So there's been challenges with that at times, to kind of remind people that like this deadline is non-negotiable. You've taken on a project and it's got to be done. And there's, if your cat's not well or whatever it is, like in my career, I've kind of prided myself on always doing what I've said I'm going to do. And I think that's really key to working with clients, that when I've been looking around for designers, it's great if they've done really good work, but the most important thing to me is that they back up what they say they're going to do and do what you ask them, because
Yeah.
there is just no time for people to back out or change their mind or say, I can't finish this on time, whatever. And especially the world of sport, like it's moving so fast, constantly commissioning new work all the time. Liverpool are playing twice a week at the moment, or 3 times a week at times. And so there is no time really for a plan B or a backup plan, because things have just got to be done. So yeah, there's been the odd time in the past, I've kind of helped someone out, maybe got involved and got me hands dirty to rescue something that was going a bit off track. But I think working in sport, the deadlines are non-negotiable. I think you can work with other clients, and maybe if you're doing a pub menu and it's a day late, it's no big deal, but you can't supply a match day graphic a day late and you've missed a game.
Yeah.
So it can be quite highly pressured at times, and I think it is quite fast paced, but yeah, it's just one of those things. There is no time to kind of do any backup plans, because so busy doing stuff for the games themselves.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I think just on that, which I think will probably spin off into what I think Callie's going to ask next. I think it's important for any aspiring artist or designer to remember that your reputation is almost as important as the work itself. You know, you're only ever really 100%. As good as the last piece of work that you delivered. And if one of your first pieces or your most recent pieces is late, is missed, doesn't meet the needs of the client, then it might feel like a massive community, but it's like creative spheres in general are a very small community, and you can never really afford to put yourself in that situation. So I know that everybody has, things that might come up in their life, and you can have very, serious personal situations for whatever reason. I think one piece of advice I would always give somebody is give somebody an indication that something's going wrong at the first point that you realize it might be going wrong, because then you might be able to figure out a solution that works for both parties, or you might be able to just come to some sort of compromise, or, apologize and kind of back out. But the worst thing you can do is 5 minutes before you were supposed to supply a piece of work, say, oh, I'm not finished, I need another day, because I ate some bad Chinese leftovers the day after that I shouldn't have. So I think, if you are in that situation, just communicate as early as possible. But yeah, always try and deliver, like Dave said, deliver on what you said you were going to.
Yeah, definitely. And I think for me, like, I've fortunately never not delivered a project. So I've been freelancing for 7 or 8 years, and I've thankfully never like kind of failed one yet. So, and I've taken that quite seriously, that sometimes that's meant that I've had to work a weekend or work through the night or cancel personal plans or not go to kids' parties, whatever it is. But if I take on a project, then it's absolutely going to get done, unless something totally extreme happens, which thankfully never has so far. But I think you're right. There's times when I've worked with other freelancers, and if they've the day after I've briefed them said, "Oh, this has just happened. Actually, it's going to be tricky this week to get this done." That's fine. I've got the rest of the week to find someone else. But it's no good, like you say, the day of the deadline, saying I've finished, but it's not quite as good as I wanted because this personal issue came up and I didn't want to tell you. So yeah, for sure. I think that your reputation is your whole business, isn't it? And I've never ever looked for work. Thankfully, work's always come through, and I could draw you like a tree, like a family tree of the first client I got at BT introduced me to someone else, and then he introduced me to someone else, and all my clients have came from that very first person. And if you produce bad work or you don't produce work or whatever, then there's a good chance that like you're going to break that family tree kind of analogy and maybe lose a really good client that could have recommended you to loads of other clients too. So I think, that is vitally important.
Yeah. And I'd also say that as when you're aspiring to be an artist, there's nothing wrong with actually turning down work if you can't take it on. Like, I know that, you want to make a name for yourself, but if you feel like the workload's too much, there's nothing wrong with you saying, actually, do you know what? I can't do this, or it's too much for me to take on. You've got to, like you said, you've got to keep your reputation intact, and it doesn't look bad on you because you couldn't do the job. It just means that, life is the way it is, and time constraints and as such could come in a way. So yeah, I think you don't, as you're starting up, you should always not bite off more than you can chew and know what you can do. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, definitely. And everyone I've met who's been successful or has got like a decent client list are the type of people that just work relentlessly to get stuff done. So when you get messages off people online saying, how'd you get great clients? You think it's all the stuff that people don't see, really, is how you get good clients. It's the fact that you're not going to let them down, and you are reliable, and and you're honest with them and you've got a good relationship with them, but it's not enough to just do great work, is it? Loads of people can do great work, but if they're going to deliver late or not deliver at all or whatever, or be difficult to work with, or particularly kind of hard work, then I think that makes a massive difference. So yeah, and a lot of these things I always think sound too easy to be true. Like, you tell someone you've just got to do what you say you're going to do, and you think, well, yeah, obviously. But it's incredible the amount of people who don't, isn't it? Or don't value that as a kind of concept, really. So yeah, for sure. It
feeds into what I was going to ask, really. I think pretty much covered it. But what would be, when you're looking for clients online or illustrators to work with, what would be your golden advice to someone who wants to get into that type of work? Say, for example, someone wants to work for you, for Liverpool. Artistically, what would you recommend they do? And also business-wise, what would you recommend they do? And is there anything you think they shouldn't be doing online?
I think some of these are very basic, but obviously producing work consistently and sharing it so other people can see it is absolutely key. I've had messages off people who want to get involved in projects, and you go to their website and there's nothing there, or you go to their Instagram and it's pictures of the dog, but there's no actual work to see. And they're kind of, maybe they're great at doing work, but I can't take the risk of commissioning someone whose work I've never seen. Or maybe it's not that extreme, but maybe they've just done 3 or 4 pieces in the last 6 months, but you want to see a bit more than that to make sure that you're feeling confident enough that they're going to do what you ask. So I think that's key, that you just got to produce work and share it, really, because no one's going to see it otherwise. And then one of the best things recently that a designer did was put together it was dead simple, but it was like a 1-page PDF of some of their work examples. They wrote a little bit about each project and just sent me a message saying, I'd love to get involved, work with you. This is what I've done recently. Here's a few examples of my work that I thought might be relevant to this project. And that was superb. And I've worked with them ever since, because I think that little bit of initiative shows quite a lot that this person's quite self-motivated and obviously passionate about what they do, quite organised, switched on enough to put a little thing together. And I'm not expecting people to create 50-page PowerPoint presentations. It's nothing major. It was dead simple, but that was quite impressive. I think that someone had took the time to sit down one night and make this little 1-page kind of mood board almost of what they've done, because I get loads of messages, which is fine, but I get loads of messages of people saying, hey, I'd love to work together, give me a shout, or hey, can I get involved in this project? And that's all it says. And then I'm thinking, I don't know anything about you, where you're from, what type of work you do. Sometimes people don't even have links on the social media, so I've got to chase them up to find a link. And in all honesty, me and most other people aren't going to have the time or the inclination to do that, really. So I think it's kind of nailing those basics, making sure that you're producing consistently good work. To be honest, it doesn't even have to be good, just consistently work to the point where it gets good, because not everyone is going to be good straight away, are they? So I think that's important. Advice to people not to do, this is like a bugbear of mine, but I find working in sport, you get a lot of people whose personal social accounts are also their work accounts. And I'm the same. So I first met a business advisor 5-6 years ago, and he said you should split your accounts, have one Twitter for yourself and one for your business. And really, I've got nothing interesting to say about myself, so I've never done that. So I kind of keep my social accounts work related. There's no pictures of my kids on there, really. There's nothing. I very rarely tweet about football, and if I do, I'll probably delete it quickly because I've just got frustrated and tweeted something stupid. But quite often I'll see designers message me saying, I'd love to work on this project with Liverpool, for example. You look at their Twitter account, and 3 tweets ago they were slagging off Jurgen Klopp because their team's just been beaten by Liverpool and stuff like that. I think is just a bit naive that most clients now are going to look through your social media and have a quick glance at what you're up to.
Yeah.
And if there's anything particularly controversial or not even serious stuff, but you're probably not going to get a new client if you've slagged off one of their players the week before, or you've moaned about it. And this is just my personal opinion. I know Karl loves a good Twitter chat sometimes with fans who don't like his opinion, and that's absolutely fine. But then Karl's probably not messaging certain teams that he doesn't like, asking to work for them. So that's his choice, and it's all a personal choice. But I find it quite a lot that it almost looks a bit naive when people expect that they're going to get work from great clients, but then the Twitter account looks like something a teenager's diary would
Slander,
resemble. Yeah. So
yeah, for sure. I've reined that in over the last few years for sure.
I can't imagine what it used to be like then.
It's terrible, but that's part of growing up, isn't it? Really, it's part of your you learn to deal with things better. Like I said, obviously I've got a large following, so you've got to have thick skin. And as we've said sort of in the previous podcast about how it all sort of started, it's hard. It is hard at the beginning because it's tough. But at that point, I wasn't trying to be an illustrator. I didn't know where I was going with my account. So there's loads of stuff on there probably that I've deleted or at the time you're just using it as a mouthpiece to sort of spout. But as I've got older and wiser, and my daughter's 14 now, and I know what social media could be like, you learn to stuff like I'll be quite straightforward in the way I tell people how I am as a person, but I will never ever abuse anyone or do anything along those lines, because I know, like we were saying before, you have to conduct yourself online in a certain way, because that is what people do now. It's not a question of your CV when they're doing their background checks on you. Your social media accounts and the way you act online is their reference. And if you're sort of spouting aggressively, or there's nothing wrong with sort of saying things in a frustrating way. If you concede a goal or your team concede a goal and you're like or whatever the case may be. But I think the way you talk to other people and the way you conduct yourself is so important now. And I've been using the same account from the beginning. So like I said, there's probably way people could probably search, 10 years ago, whatever it is, however long I've been on. And the thing is, I don't mind it. Like, it doesn't matter to me anymore, because I know as an adult, I've grown up and I've learned that's what you do as humans. No one is perfect. No one can, you're not going to say and do everything right. And they are, tweets and whatever to show how far I've come as a person. It makes me proud of myself that I don't do certain things that I used to do, but that's part of growing up, and you're never too old to learn and to mature and to do things. So, but yeah, like Dave said, you've got to conduct yourself in a certain way to make sure that prospective clients don't think you're a bit of an idiot for the way you sort of conduct yourself and the things you say. So it's massively important. I agree.
Yeah, and I think that is, like you say, you've got to do that. Well, you don't have to if you don't want to work with well-known clients. You can use your social media for whatever you want. If your plan is to just sell prints online, it probably doesn't matter. But if your plan is to try and work with some of the biggest clients in sports, then I think it's important that your social media profiles reflect the fact that you're trying to be professional and be reliable and all those things. And it is a thing that clients have talked to me about, because there's a constant issue when clients post illustrations, for example, on Instagram, and the first comment is like, "Oh, who's the artist for this?" And a lot of brands and clients don't want to tell you, because if they tag you on that piece and I click on that tag and find that person's written all kinds of awful tweets over the last year, then that brand is going to feel like they're somehow connected to this piece of drama that they just don't need. So it definitely comes into brands' thinkings and big corporations' thinkings that they don't want to be associated with individuals just on the off chance that they've said something controversial. So for me, I just think the safest bet for me is to just treat my socials like an extension of my work website, and just talk about business stuff. And yet it is hard. There's times when you're frustrated as a sports fan, you want to rant about stuff, but that's what WhatsApp's for. You can rant privately to your friends and family. And
I think a lot of people react to that kind of notion as like people having their speech policed by people. But I think it's like, I don't think anybody's saying like you can't have a personality online. I think everyone, like the widest held opinion is just don't be a dickhead. Like, all we're talking about is like the kind of stuff that if you said it to your mates, somebody would go, whoa, calm it down a little bit, man. And I think, that's the kind of just self inhibitions that you need to just like measure and understand. Is if you wouldn't say it to somebody in real life, the person that you're talking about, then just don't say it online. I think it's as simple as that. I certainly don't I don't have a totally sanitized social media presence. Like, I'll swear on Twitter, I'll show excitement and enthusiasm, but I'll never slag anyone off, whether that's a brand, a person, or anything like that.
Yeah, definitely. And it's no different from like pre-internet days. You wouldn't have in the 80s stood outside Nike HQ with a big Adidas placard saying nice.
No, exactly,
and then knocked on the door and asked for a job. Like, it's not. I think you're right. Some people do see it as like a freedom of speech issue, but I don't think it's that deep, really. It's just being respectful of the type of clients that you want to work with and conducting yourself. If you want to be professional, then conduct yourself in a professional manner. But
yeah. Sort of a kind of segue into a question I was going to ask you, Dave, was speaking of content that you can post online and stuff like that. When you're working with big clients like BT Sport, Liverpool, and all the other big brands in your portfolio, what sort of content did they allow you to share from behind the scenes? Did they allow you to, like, I don't ever see much like work in progress stuff and things like that, which for me, I'm really interested in seeing that type of content as a creator to see if I can learn something. Is it purely just nothing gets released until we're finished, or what are the sort of boundaries that you have to stick to?
Yeah, I think it depends on the client, to be honest. Sometimes, well, all times you won't see stuff like that from me because I just forget. There's times I've or I've done things like I screen recorded a piece and then I just haven't got time to edit it into something presentable. So it just sits on my desktop and never gets used. But I've had both extremes. I've had clients that don't want us to share anything at all for whatever reason. They've got their own reasons for that. And then I've got other clients that are like really keen for you to send them some behind the scenes stuff. Like, is there any chance you could show us what you've been doing? And to me, that's almost like an extra paid part of that job. If you've got to film yourself or screen record or document what you're doing or take photos of your sketch pad or whatever, that is content, isn't it? These days people do love that.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's an extension of the job. Like, if that gets built into the brief, then that's fine.
Yeah.
But now and again, I've had clients who said, when the job's finished, any chance you could send me all your sketches because we want to post them? And I think that would be fine if that was agreed up front, but it's time and effort, isn't it, to do all that and document it in a way that looks presentable. And but I'd love to be honest. Like stuff on TikTok, I think is great when you're watching people's work processes or people drawing on an iPad or people whatever it is. All the behind the scenes stuff is the stuff that you're excited to see, isn't it? Because you don't normally get to see it.
Yeah.
And I wish I could do more of it. And I've gone through phases where I've dabbled a bit with like screen recordings or tried to film bits and bobs. But yeah, I've either just never finished it or I've been too busy to give it proper attention. But yeah, I think it is. It's just the client thing. It depends on the clients. A lot of them as well, you're often producing work in advance of a situation. So I do some stuff with BT and we will prep for, like if I'm just making social graphics, you might prep for, say Man United need a new manager. You might make 3 or 4 versions of the same thing, announcing Pochettino's new manager or Eddie Howe's new manager or Brendan Rodgers, whatever. So you can't really show any of those until one of them gets used. And then quite often clients don't really want you to show the unused stuff. So I've got folders of stuff that like I'm really proud of that's never been seen, which is really upsetting. Got a whole folder of stuff from when Liverpool didn't win the Champions League. When what year was it? The year before 18. We won it. 2018,
19, yeah.
Mo Salah stuff, lovely illustrations of Mo Salah, King of the World, and all that kind of thing. But never see the light of day. So
there's plenty of Man United fans that'd buy that off you.
Yeah, yeah, true. Yeah. But yeah, it's just one of those things. I'd love to see more though. I'd love to do more kind of behind the scenes content because it is so interesting just seeing how other people work, isn't it? And you pick up tips, I think, from how people create stuff. Like I love watching people's speed art on YouTube of what they've done. And often it's too fast for me to even like work out what they're doing. But if you've got the time to slow it down and watch it through, and Photoshop's one of those pieces of software that you and me could make the same thing, but we both make it in totally different ways because people use layers differently and brushes differently and all that. So I love seeing how people do what it is they do. But yeah, it's almost like that could be a second string to your business, couldn't it? That kind of content creation that comes alongside it.
I don't know if you'll be the same as me when it comes to Photoshop stuff, but like I watch like people like Dean Davis, who's like a proper wizard, or Ethan, who does a lot of really good designs, and there's a bunch of amazing people on Twitter and Instagram that do stuff that's way beyond me in terms of Photoshop. But I watch how they do it, and they do it really properly and like use all of the tools to like their utmost advantage. And like because I started using Photoshop in like 2001, and there weren't tutorials, like it was barely taught at college, so like I watched them and I'm like, man, that is not how I do it. I do it in some sort of like kind of sketchy way where I'm using layers like they shouldn't be. I'm like, my work's very destructive, So like, what's your work process like in something like Photoshop? Is it very clean? Is it like, are you using everything as it should be, or is it a little bit more self-taught?
Oh no, mate, it's an absolute mess. Unless I know that the client needs the PSD at the end, it's a mess. So there are certain times, certain things. Quite often in the last year, I've built social media templates for clients. So I'll send them Photoshop files for their staff to use, and they've got to be like super simple, because most of the time the people who are using those files have got a basic Photoshop knowledge, but nothing better than that. So in those cases, I'll clean up the layers, I'll put stuff in folders, I'll label it all. But day-to-day stuff, no, I just go for it. It's all a bit messy, really. And I'm the same. I see some stuff, like, I don't know if you saw Ethan's, he did a YouTube, he's just started a YouTube series. Not that I want to push anyone else's YouTube series, because this is obviously the number one.
No, more than happy to do that, mate. More than happy to promote creators.
He asked people to send in half-finished pieces of work, and then he'd finish them off.
Oh, really?
It was great to watch. I think he's posted 1 or 2 so far. So someone sent him a half-finished basketball poster or piece of social content, and he kind of deconstructed it and then rebuilt it again, but added his own effects and layers and type and 3D text. And it was like, it's incredible to watch. And just seeing stuff like that, you think, oh, I would never have thought of making a background out of that certain technique, or flipping that and inverting that thing and turning it upside down and turning the saturation down and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, I'm very much like if it looks good at the end, that's enough for me.
I'm exactly the same.
Definitely.
I think I cook in the same way. Like, our kitchen's a disaster zone when I finish cooking, but as long as it tastes good.
Yeah,
there's 100 pots and pans everywhere.
Oh yeah, I'm 8 pans to make pasta. Like, that's the kind of person I am in the kitchen. So I think, like, we talked about your shop earlier, but I just wanted to ask, like, in terms of like personal projects, obviously you don't have a shop anymore, so they wouldn't really have a specific destination, but do you still work away on personal stuff? Have you got any projects that you've been working on? I know you're an incredibly busy guy, so the answer might just very well be no.
Yeah, like, sadly not really. I do now and again. I'll like dabble on my iPad, because I bought an iPad and an Apple Pencil and Procreate about 2 years ago. And I very rarely use it for client stuff, because I just don't feel confident enough that it's going to be up to scratch. So if I do ever have a free evening or a couple of hours, I might do a little bit of doodling on there, but it's more just me kind of playing around, and nothing I'd ever show anyone. Like, you see people like Dan Layden sharing time lapses of his sketches, and it just blows your mind that he built this incredible piece from like 3 squares and a triangle, and then the next thing you see it again and it's finished. But yeah, so I'd love to, though. It's the downside, I think, of client work. Like, it's great and it's lovely being busy and having regular work, but you've got no time to then do your own stuff. And often it's like an age-old problem, isn't it? But when your hobby turns into your job, what do you do for a hobby? Like, after a day of working on your computer, do you really want to come back at 8 o'clock at night and do another hour or 2 just for fun? Probably not. But then that's what I used to do. I used to work in really boring jobs and then spend my evenings designing stuff because I loved it.
Yeah.
And so, I don't think there's any answer to that, but I'm sure everyone faces the same issue.
Yeah.
100%.
So yeah, sadly no personal projects to report just yet, but we'll see what next year brings. I think that's been my catchphrase, to be honest. I might not be as busy next year. So
I don't think you'll resist if it looks like Liverpool are going to win the league.
Pulls you back in.
Yeah, I reckon it would.
I was just going to ask you one final question before we start to wrap up. So currently at the moment, who would you say is your favorite artist?
Oof.
Apart from me, obviously.
Well, obviously not counting you 3 guys, because that'd just be
maybe so it doesn't feel as unfair on the rest of the community. Just say, are there any artists you'd like to highlight or put a bit of a spotlight onto?
There's loads, because obviously I'm quite fortunate that part of my job now involves searching around online looking for illustrators. So I really enjoy kind of delving into people's work and seeing what they can do. And I think, being honest, I'm quite a safe designer. I think a lot of my work's kind of fairly safe. So I love it when I see stuff that it's like way out there and like colours that I would just be too scared to use, or styles of stuff that is just bonkers. There's a guy called Charles Drawing. I think he's Spanish. If you Google him, though, your Google always corrects it to Charles Darwin. So it's not him. But I love his stuff. I've worked with him on a couple of projects, and it's very kind of like almost comic book style, crazy colours, really dramatic poses or layouts that are like breaking the frame of what he's working on. So I love his stuff. There's a guy as well called Nigel Buchanan, I think. He does a lot of the 8x8 football mag covers, and he's someone I often go to and look at his stuff, because I feel like his work is similar to mine, but much better. So if I'm struggling on a piece and I think like, what would Nigel do? How does he draw teeth? How does he make ears look normal and not sticky outy or whatever? So I often kind of study his stuff, and then there's a whole host of like illustrators I could reel off that I love the work of. Basically, if I've worked with them in the past, then I must rate them, because I would never kind of get involved with anyone whose work I don't like. But and the industry is just massive, isn't it? There's a massive niche now of illustrators, and specifically like sports illustrators, and then definitely football illustrators. So, and I think back to that first postcard I sold in 2012, 2013, whatever it was, 2013. And I don't know whether this is like looking back with rose-tinted glasses, but it didn't feel like there was that many people doing that kind of stuff at the time.
Yeah.
So your work was getting noticed because people were like, oh, that's cool, he's drawing a footballer. I would never have thought of illustrating a footballer. Whereas now you can't move on Twitter, for every other man's got a shop, hasn't he, selling stuff, selling dodgy mugs, Christmas jumpers.
Just saying that yesterday, that's the sole reason why my art changes so often and so consistently, because the competition's just so high.
And I think that's how you stand out, isn't it? If you keep pushing yourself to be creative and to try new things, because there are artists I could name that very much look like they just copy other people's styles, which is fine if that's just you're just practicing or you're trying to improve. But then you would wonder if they'd ever get any work, because why would you commission the kind of knockoff version when you can go and get the real thing? But I think it's a challenge, isn't it, to keep evolving and to keep pushing yourself to try new stuff. And there's people who are really good at that online that are always just trying new stuff and often being successful off the back of it, because clients do notice it. And I think it's true, if you start looking around, if you're trying to commission a football illustrator, for example, there's so many that just all look the same. And so many people whose work is just very similar. And it's not bad work, it's just safe and normal and kind of what 20 other people could do. So I think the people who find success are those that are willing to like push themselves and experiment a bit and try new things. And like you were saying before, that kind of showing people the behind the scenes stuff as well, it gives you the chance to experiment. You're not presenting work to clients saying this is a final piece that I'm super proud of, but you could show people this is what I did tonight and it was just a bit of fun. It might not work, or it might work, but I've just tried it out. And so I think in a way there's never been a better time to work in this field, because social media gets your stuff out there so easily, doesn't it? Whereas when I first started, you had to print off all your work and put it in a big folder and go to someone's office and sit down and talk them through every piece. Whereas now you can be pushing stuff out 2-3 times a day, and if it's rubbish, it'll get forgotten, and if it's good, it'll get noticed. But the downside is the competition's bigger, isn't it? Everyone's doing it, so it's a very kind of saturated field.
Okay, cool. So we'll move on to the final section, which is these quick fire questions, Dave. So no hesitation.
To be judged.
I'm nervous now.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you ready?
Yep.
Okay. Here we go. Nike or Adidas?
Oh, Nike.
Mac or PC?
Mac.
Photoshop or Illustrator?
Photoshop.
iPhone or Android?
iPhone.
Scone or scone?
Scone. What's this scone nonsense?
No, he'd say scone.
Yes. This is wild.
Legend.
This is wild. Simpsons or Family Guy?
Family Guy.
Yes.
Tea or coffee?
Tea.
Cats or dogs?
Cats.
Coke or Pepsi?
Oh, Pepsi.
What's better, the book or the movie?
Oh, it depends on the book or the movie, doesn't it? But a movie's easier to watch, isn't it? Yeah.
So the movie.
So the book.
Beer or wine?
Oh, beer.
Night in or night out?
Yes, probably a night in is more. Yeah. Let's go night in.
Pirates or ninjas?
Oh, ninjas for sure, yeah. Why do you want to be a pirate if you can be a ninja?
Yeah, fair enough. UFC or WWE?
UFC.
Madrid 2019 or Istanbul 05?
It feels like two totally different things, but I'll say Madrid 19 because it felt like that was a more kind of pivotal moment.
Suarez or Torres?
Suarez.
And lastly, who would you rather win the league, Everton or United?
Oh, you got to give me realistic choices.
I was going to say he's thinking about whether he's going to work with them in the future.
Yeah, true, yeah. All of them. I can't remember Everton ever win the league. My brother's an Evertonian as well, so he'd be made up with that. But yeah, let's say that because might happen. But
the lesser two evils.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, there is one final question based off your questions. When can you replace Yoni?
Yeah. Oh, I haven't got a cat or a Millennium Falcon, so I'm not your man.
No. All right, good stuff, Dave. Thank you very much for your time today. It's been really good chatting with you.
Thank you, man.
No, nice one. Thanks for having me, boys. I enjoyed that. So
appreciate it.
Good luck with the podcast.
Thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to Untitled Artwork.